Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Mind Refinery Podcast. As usual, I am your host, Kyle Bodanis. So what you are about to hear is the conclusion of part 1 of our deep dive into the creative world of Kanye West. Part 2 will be coming at you Thursday. Before we get started, we are happy to announce that our culinary series, Plated, has been nominated for Best Documentary and Lifestyle Series, as well as Best Toronto Series at the 2020 Toronto Web Fest. The festival is on July 10th to 11th, and we'll have more information on screening schedules on our social media. By the way, if you haven't seen Plated, hop on our YouTube channel to check it out, and absolutely, positively, do not forget to smash that subscribe button. And now, without further ado, here's the show. So I want to move on to Graduation. The previous record kind of really set him up to move into this one, and I think that's kind of what's cool about each record he puts out, is because it's as if it's opening a door, giving an opportunity for the other one to succeed. And there's, a very specific narrative moving forward, even if he's just kind of figuring it out in between. I think at this point there's still an overall narrative. Whereas in the we're in the next, the Twisted Fantasy and 808 and Heartbreaks, there's more thought in terms of where he's going to go next, whereas these three feel very much linked together. So what are our initial thoughts of Graduation?
I would say Graduation, I would call that like Kanye's kind of assertion of dominance, and his kind of, by this point, it's unmistakable that Kanye is in the pop sphere and Kanye is the lead hip hop, or kind of the lead artist of this time period. There's like he beats 50 Cent in that kind of competition they had, the sales.
Oh, he destroyed him,
and that ends that wave of music, and like it
literally and figuratively.
There's no better metaphor for the end of, like, for the changing of what is, the hip hop. Not even just the hip. I mean, obviously, like, that's a hip. That has massive implications for the sound of hip hop. So but and he will transcend the genre at this point. Like, this is the record that will do it. But the 50 Cent thing, obviously a huge publicity stunt. I don't think there was that much bad blood between them. I think that they both had, they wanted to see how much they could push the records. And you got two people, this is
cross promotion too, like
100%,
100% builds both.
Yeah. This is why I don't necessarily fully believe all that like Blur and Oasis shit from the fucking 90s, because at the end of the day, the only thing that can come from this is more people buying more records, because then you get the people, it's like everyone's base comes out to make sure that they're represented. But yeah, I think that whole thing with 50 Cent really reflects where everything is going and how things have settled, because this is an important record for 50 Cent coming out. He's had success, but he's got to keep it going amidst a genre and an industry that is changing as a result of these, young people coming in with maybe less antiquated ideas of what hip-hop is. But
I think that this album is like a very strong declaration and a shift in tone, not only for Kanye, but like in the industry as itself. And like, as you said, fucking 50 Cent, those albums, there's not a lot of progression on those albums. There's not a lot of evolution on those albums. He's kind of putting out different iterations of the same idea multiple times, while Kanye is fucking reinventing the wheel every time. And yeah, like there's like just like the Graduation, like the title and suit. He's graduating. He's kind of leaving back that leaving that college dropout persona behind a little bit. Kind of, we're getting a taste of things to come. But yeah, I think just overall, I think it's just like a very like declarative statement of a shift in tone.
So like everything from the cover, you had like Murakami designed the cover, the brightness of it compared to like the muted like earth tones of College Dropout and the dark kind of cover of Late Registration. So this is like Kanye announcing himself in like so many ways. Like the College Dropout bear is still present, but the album,
he's animated now.
He's animated, yeah. He's like shooting off into the stratosphere.
He's literally leaving that like the college behind him. Like he's graduating, he's left that behind him. New Kanye, new album. Who dis?
Why did this this album make a mark? What was transcendent about this? Because this album really takes him, he's no longer concerned with, I got to be at the top of the rap game. It's how can I be a pop star? So what do you think about this record kind of pushed him in, to those heights?
I think like there's a lot of things about this album. I think there's the kind of, he left the soul trappings of College Dropout and Late Registration. He had someone like DJ Toomph on there who was like a producer for Jeezy at the time. He also had Jeezy vocals on time. So Jeezy was kind of doing his own thing, and Kanye like was incorporating that sound in. He had like kind of like an indie rock kind of bloodline like flowing through this. Like there's just so much kind of at base. He had T-Pain in there. He had like Lil Wayne, who was like in his own kind of category, but he brought him in, and he also still kind of stayed true to his roots through the whole thing, while like giving you so much more to work with.
Yeah, and just like every single fucking track on this album is just massive. Like every track on this album is a banger. Like I really don't think there's a bad track off Graduation.
Favorite track?
It's just honestly one of my favorite songs of his. Can't Tell Me Nothing, man. Like honestly, that's one of my favorites of his. Like that song gets me fired up.
I think a lot of people would not like a lot of songs on this album, though. I think for me, I think this is my like least favorite of the trilogy, and I think going back, like probably one of my least favorite Kanye albums, as good as they all are. Like if I had to pick an album I didn't like as much, like I think at this time too, I was like concerned with like, oh, now everyone's found out about Kanye. He doesn't feel like as special and as integral to like my life, because now he like belongs to the masses a little bit more. And I'd say like most people I know don't like Drunk or Hot Girls. I'd say Big Brother also aged terribly.
Yeah. Drunk and Hot Girl is one of my least favorite Kanye West songs.
Yeah, I would say a lot of people do that. I like it, but I can see why people don't.
Am I lame for liking Homecoming?
I don't think you're lame for liking anything that isn't, Chingy or REO Speedwagon. So, I mean,
I love Homecoming, man. I don't care. It's so catchy. I've heard the older version too, like without Chris Martin, and like that one's good too. But man, I don't know. Like I'm not even a Coldplay fan. But I don't know, man. Something about that hook and like that beat. It's again, it's one of my favorite Kanye's. It's lame, I know, but I love it.
I mean, it's hard to think that liking an artist is special when soccer moms, aka Karens, are, singing stronger. Like it's hard to, it's hard to like separate, because then all of a sudden it becomes, there's so many bands and artists where you're like, I don't mind the person, but the fans kind of ruin it for me. One thing
Rick and Morty.
yeah, I kind of exactly what I really liked about this album was the arena aspirations. That's what, for me, all of these songs, why, I mean, I love this, I like this record, minus a couple a couple things here and there, but its ability to be translated and to be built to be translated on a large stage is fantastic. And you see that, spending his time touring with like U2 and the Rolling Stones. So what you're doing is you're seeing two bands that have created two of the largest tours in history, from a visual standpoint and from a sales standpoint. U2 creates Zoo TV, which is this huge multimedia thing, and then the Stones in the '90s, Bridges to Babylon, and Kanye West talking about how it's almost like with him, there's always apprenticeships. He's always like, how can I work with someone who teaches me how to do this stuff? And you see with his
always learning, like we said before.
Yeah, and just his ability to make these songs theatrical and, for a much larger stage, bringing arena rock to the to the hip hop lexicon. What about these songs makes them bigger? Like, and how did it fuel the Glow in the Dark tour? Like, why were these songs really custom made for it?
They're bombastic. I think that's the easiest way to put it. Like they fill a stadium. Like you got those fucking big beats, you got those big fucking hooks. Like you can have people singing along, people rapping along, and like I don't know, I think it just lends itself really well to filling up. And then he looks at everything from like we're saying, like a visual standpoint. So all his live shows are like insane from a technical standpoint. Like he pairs himself with like crazy I don't know what you call them, like stage managers for shows, conceptual artists and stuff. So he really does designs that shit from the ground up. I've only seen videos from this tour. I've seen him twice. I saw the Watch the Throne tour, and then I saw the Yeezus tour. So I'm definitely not like super familiar with this, but just I'm sure we'll touch on that like later on. But just from those shows, complete spectacles. Like they were expensive, but worth every second. Those things were more of like performance art than, well, especially Yeezus was more like performance art than it was a concert. And like you're watching this in a fucking like at ACC or not Scotiabank now, whatever. It was ACC at the time.
The Glow in the Dark tour, I thought that was at Molson Amphitheater. I saw this one.
Oh, Molson Amphitheater. That would have been a sick show.
Yeah, that show, and he had Rihanna opening for him, who wasn't obviously the Rihanna we know now. But I think like it was a lot of the electro elements that he brought to this, right? Because like this is like pre EDM taking over the charts, but obviously like working with Daft Punk on Stronger and
like flashing lights and shit.
Flashing Lights is like another like obviously like a huge song. I think Mr. Hudson's on there somehow. T-Pain, like Good Life. Like there's elements and qualities about like the songs on here which don't mirror anything so much on the previous two albums, but kind of point towards a new and a bigger sound and a bigger place. Like you said, like touring with U2 and kind of coming off of these things. And this is like the era of like, I think iPods were just like kind of becoming popular this time, like, or maybe had already been around some iteration, but like it was just like kind of a newer era and a newer way that music was going, that like it hadn't really been what it had come from.
Yeah, and returning to dipping back into this idea of arena rock from the 70s, late 80s, that, you know, and incorporating that into what he does. I was at Lollapalooza Grand Park in 2008, and we caught a set, but they overlapped the headliners. Like this was a particularly awesome headlining, like, you know, rundown. So like it was like Radiohead, Nine Inch Nails, Rage Against the Machine, Wilco, and Kanye West, and absolutely fantastic. One of the best lineups I've ever seen. So we caught, I believe it was Rage Against the Machine, and then went to the other side and we caught the last part of Kanye West's set, and he played Stronger, and it was just incredible because we didn't laugh off that Kanye West was headlining it. It's just that if you haven't seen what he's doing and really thought about it and how it translates, you're not gonna get it unless you experience it. And when we went there, you know, he closed with Stronger, and it was just as big and bombastic as any of the rock bands we had seen. And that's why he's a pop artist, because, you know, people, and I think people unfairly give hip hop a bad name from a live perspective. I just think that I don't think there's the associate. I think at certain points in the hip hop lexicon, there wasn't the association with big live acts as there was with, you know, just laying down good beats, putting out good records. It's almost like the live act was kind of an afterthought. Whereas with Kanye West, it's the centerpiece. It's what he is. It's the 9 to 5 of his musical career, and, you know, his ability to project that, I was really wowed. And he was like picking Trent Reznor's brain on how to light stages, and like talking to his lighting guy and talking about how he's incorporating his electronic elements with lighting and all these different things to make this better. And then when you see it live, you really understand why in interviews he's like, you know, a song like Stronger is meant to be on a stage in front of thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And you really see what that is. And you really get it. That's why I think I've seen him live a couple times. I think you really, in order to really understand his artistry, you must see him in person.
Yeah.
Let me ask you just a quick question. What other than like the only ones I can think of is like Beastie Boys, but like in hip hop, were there any other acts that were doing like big stage shows?
Yeah, there's a lot of, like, I mean, Eminem was going on huge tours around this time. He had like the Up in Smoke tour with like
Right. Okay.
Those big Rockefeller tours. But like, I think before this, you couldn't, and after this, you couldn't tour the same way and do stadiums. like I think you could maybe do some of the bigger cities at the time, but like I think after this was like you had to rethink as a hip hop artist, you had to rethink your live show.
Your live show can't just be a party.
Yeah,
I think that's what was still missing. I think that the Up in Smoke tour was a turning point in that, because what they did was they put on this big spectacle, and especially played on the ideas of like, and also like when Eminem was touring, just playing on his idea and his lens of America, and playing using that as part of his live performance and his setup. There's just a narrative with Kanye. Like he creates this whole sci-fi thing around, this whole sci-fi storytelling around, the Glow in the Dark tour, and it's it's like something Yes would have done in the 70s. It's like something Rush would have done in the 70s. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Um, but he's not afraid of it. Like I'm sure if you went up to somebody in 2004 and said, "Listen, we're going to do a live performance, and it's going to be big, and it's going to be about this, sci-fi," they'd be looking at you and probably being like, "Well, what the fuck?" Because you know what? He probably said something like this at his original pitch meetings, like to Capitol. He's probably like, "We're going to do this. I'm going to be greatest. I'm going to be bigger than this, and we're going to make this huge thing, and it's going to be fucking huge." And they're looking at him like, "I don't even see what this is going to be."
Yeah.
Because it takes, we'll put it this way, we mentioned him before, but all credit to Dame Dash for really seeing what this whole fucking thing could be. You know what I mean? Whether it was not wanting to lose the beats that he could make, or just understanding that overall, he just overall his talent and what he brought from a level of artistry, it's pretty fucking big. And to what you're saying, Coburn, you can't, like, at this point it changes the paradigm for touring. There's things now, there is an absolute base minimum that you have to do when you're touring now, or else people are like, well, what the fuck is that? Why did I just pay $90 of my money, $120 of my money, $300 of my money?
Yeah, I was gonna say for Kanye, that's a more accurate number.
Yeah. So
yeah. You can like look at like the people who came after him. You can look at like Kendrick's recent tours, or obviously like Drake's recent tours, or like anyone who's toured, and it's like you went from like being a rapper on a stage and a DJ and maybe like kind of some graphics, and now like there's risers, there is like people are setting up stages differently, people are like coming down from like dropping down on you and stuff like that, like the kind of stuff that you didn't really see unless it was like stadium rock, because rap didn't really have the capacity maybe at the time, but now rap is completely has the capacity, and rap like since Kanye has to have the capacity, or else it's not really worth it to go see it.
this music filled the space sonically to make that happen.
Exactly.
I think it allowed, I mean, artists like Madonna in the late 80s, when they were putting together, what their arena situation were going to be like, they were very wary of that, and that's why they made sure that that the live experience was separate from necessarily the album experience, which for pop is risky, so only the best can really pull it off. But you know for me, this changes the way we look at the rap world, and I want to know, like, when this album is done, where do we find Kanye West in the pop lexicon?
At the forefront,
Yeah, I think he's undeniably like who are his contemporaries at this point. Like, there's not really anyone who was filling space like him. There's not really anyone who was taking the risks at the same time that he was. And like he kind of had completely kind of crossed over from being like, also like, this is obviously 2 years after, but like calling out the president. What rapper like since like NWA or whoever had like publicly called out the president to the point where it was like a national headline?
Yeah, I think at this point, I mean, you can't. It would be disingenuous to call him a rapper. I think, he's a at this point he is the pop music trendsetter. The things that are going to happen in music are going to largely, not completely, but be largely based on the things that he's going to do. And he's going to set a sound, and he's going to tear that sound down, and then he's going to set another sound up, and he's going to tear it down again. And he can do that because it's almost like he's fucking Neo in the Matrix, where he understands the rules, so he can manipulate things to how he sees fit. This idea of terraforming the music industry for the things that he's going to put out. And I think his ability to do that, there's very few artists who can do that at that level and really consider the whole package. Like he is, I mean, on our, Lance, on our weekend, on our podcast about the weekend, we talked about the weekend's ability to kind of do that, getting the ability to do that now, where he kind of understands how media works, how pop music works, and he's able to, work through that and really embrace it. Kanye West dictates it though, and that's what put him at this point. He's at the highest tier, of musicianship. Sorry, of pop creativity and musicianship at this point.
Should we come back to the 50 Cent battle? Did we touch on that enough? Like how big of a shift that was?
Let's talk about it more.
Well, I think like having someone like who was at 50's level, and 50 had gone diamond, like at least twice, maybe up until this point. And
yeah, the first record especially was ridiculous.
Like there was no one really like him, and it was kind of like the rebirth or a third iteration of gangsta rap, where to the point where like, it was like him and Eminem were the old rappers that were like banned and protested against. I remember in Toronto, there was like a Toronto Star article with like, we can't let him come to the city. He's going to negatively affect everything.
I forgot about that. It's ludicrous. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy to think about now, but at the time it was like so serious.
Now they're doing it with Jordan Peterson, but before it was fucking Eminem.
Yeah, Eminem and 50 Cent.
Yeah.
So to kind of have Kanye, who at that point, like up until the point, wasn't like the rapper that like, maybe played in the suburbs in the same way that 50 did, to kind of tear down that old paradigm and replace it with this new like soul and pop and indie and like this new infused kind of way. And like, I don't think gangsta rap really ever recovered to the point that it was like at like when 50 Cent was reigning, like people didn't go platinum like that after.
Well, it's like gangster rap didn't invite other people to the party, like it didn't bring in the wider musical community, so it could never transcend, its genre, or it could even really continue, right? Like in order for music to continue for a long time, it needs to be constantly fueled, and it needs to have room to grow, and you can't just keep listening. That's why, the comment about 50 Cent's records just kind of being the same thing over and over again is spot on, because it's like, are you selling hits or are you trying to create something? Like that for me is the fundamental difference. And listen, more power to anybody who makes good tracks and gets paid for it. Like that is difficult shit. But I think at some point, especially when you're comparing them in a beef, but in a competition, you have one artist who is stagnant and representing the old world, and this new artist who all he wants to do is consume more influence and then spit it out to an unsuspecting population, and then have them love it.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like I don't think we'll see another paradigm shift like that so obvious and so like in your face.
Yeah, I think if anything, we're due for one now, but I'm just wondering where the fuck that's going to come from.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Like, is anyone? Because I don't think we'll see another Kanye. I don't think we'll see another like once in a lifetime kind of person to shift whole industries and whole genres and bend them and mold them and, like you said, terraform them to his will.
I think that the music industry is a little too decentralized for that at this point. Whereas but I mean, at the same time, like everyone says, I don't know if there's going to be another this, and I don't know if there's going to be another that. And like in my gut reaction to that is you're right. But then it's like, then it comes, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Then it comes. Exactly. And this is probably why he got rejected so many times, because it's like no one else could see that too. And to be very honest with you, if anything, it's, you got to have a little know-how, but you got to have a fucking little bit of luck too.
Absolutely.
I hope it catches on. So to tie up this first leg of our journey here, what work best defines this period for Kanye West? At the end of this run, what would be the work that, if you were to say, okay, describe Kanye West's early period, what would you show them?
Probably late registration. I think it's just like that perfect kind of like sweet spot where even though like I may like Graduation better, I think Graduation is kind of like a taste of kind of like what of things to come, and like College Dropout is kind of like almost a bit of a summary of like all his like the like his past but before the solo work. So I feel like I think Late Registration is probably most representative of that era.
Yeah, I think I would double down on that. I would say Graduation is a good summation of like what led up, but I think Late Registration distills Kanye best at this era, at this time period. Like it's kind of the sum of all its parts. So I think obviously you can't have Graduation without Late Registration, but Late Registration I think is a little bit fuller. It's a little bit like it shows you the lushness, and as much as it's not like a stadium album in the same way that Graduation is, it gives you the best parts of College Dropout, and it kind of fills out Kanye, and it gives you his politics again, reiterates, but also gives you a bit more into his personality. It's introspective, and it's like it connects in a way that I think Graduation doesn't for me.
I think Graduation is a more ambitious record. I think it aspires to be more, but Late Registration is the complete idea, I think. I think that there was it's what he wanted to accomplish at the beginning of his career. I think it's the footnote. I think Graduation is almost more akin to the records that would follow, but not as good as the records that they would follow, if that makes any sense. So what he wanted to do and where he wanted to take things is represented on Graduation, but he doesn't fully get there until albums, the next albums. I think Late Registration is his best purely hip hop album. I think it's fantastic. I think it's um, one of the best records of the decade for sure, and it just gives me a feeling. It takes me to a time and place that it's the only album that can really do it. It's kind of the one that cemented my love of Kanye West, and it made me want to embrace the narrative that he was putting out even more. So that's why on Graduation, it was amazing to see him experiment, but he was hinting at a bigger thing that he would eventually get to, which is creating that certified, you know, legendary album, that certified one that has to go into the Library of Congress because it's so fucking good. I think it's My Dark Twisted Fantasy. However, Late Registration, I think it's the only one of his albums that can really be argued is as good as that record. I love his other records, but I think that My Dark Twisted Fantasy represents an idea that came to its full completion, and Late Registration is the first idea that came to full completion.
Yeah, I would say
that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Did you say that like some of his albums feel like there's half of his old album and half of his new album?
Yeah.
Because I think that like definitely sums Graduation up, because I think he kind of starts you lead in with the Wake Up Mr. West, which is from Late Registration, and then the kind of school theme almost dies out like really early on
Yeah.
in this album, and then there's like a new kind of Kanye that comes after like the school theme is kind of over, and then Kanye's like kind of has more freedom to experiment and to grow. And as soon as like the school theme wraps up, and I think the school theme wraps up super quickly on Graduation, and then he bleeds into a new Kanye.
And then you have like Stronger, and then like you have like Stronger is almost like it kicks down the door, and like this is kind of like the new what's new.
The college thing is almost like an afterthought on Graduation. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of how Sergeant Pepper's is about this fictional band, but that's not really put through the entire record. It like appears in flourishes, but like there's still, Yet Within You Without You, where it's not part of that narrative, where it's more moving on to another thing. I think that's what Graduation does. I totally agree. It doesn't keep it. It's almost like you're seeing the epilogue of the college situation, the college narrative, and then it's where he's going to go next.
Because he initially was going to be a 4-part album like concept, so it was going to be
I didn't know that.
Late Registration, Graduation, and then culminating in Good Ass Job. And we'll definitely talk about it on the next episode, but there was something that obviously derailed where he was heading with that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
All right, guys, on that note, we got to get out of here. Coburn, Andrew, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, no,
Yeah,
thank you
thanks
for
a
being
lot,
here.
man. It was a good time.
And we'll talk to you next time. All right, guys, thanks for listening. Just a reminder, if you like this podcast and want to keep hearing it, subscribe and give us a 5-star review. And if you're not already subscribing to our YouTube channel or following us on social media, get on it. You will not regret it.